practice. Out of practice. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 is where we are at tonight. And it's good to see all of you. We have not been in 1 Thessalonians for about 3 weeks now. And that is because we were gone to Mile High. And then last week we did birthdays and did a recap and birthdays. And so we're back at it. And what I'm going to do is we're going to focus on verses 7 down to verse 12 tonight, but we will start at verse 1 to reread what we've already learned, what I've already taught through, just to get a running start before we get into verse 7. And it's good to see all of you. Glad that you are here tonight. Thank you for taking a little bit of time away from projects and schoolwork. I know that you probably enjoy getting that break, but I also know that there's stress that goes along with that because you got to run out of here after and get that stuff done. And so I appreciate you being here tonight. Let me show you where we're at in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Maybe I can get some help from the back and we'll see. Let me see if this is working yet. I don't know if it's working. If that's probably you. That's you? Okay. So we've got the conduct of the missionaries here. The missionaries being Paul and the people that were traveling with him, the guys that were traveling with him. And he's going back and talking to, I shouldn't say going back. He's not in Thessalonica. He's writing to the Thessalonians. But he's reminding them of what it was like when they were there ministering to them. So let's pick it up at verse 1 where he says to them, "For you yourselves know, brethren or brothers, family, that our coming to you was not in vain." It wasn't empty. And then what he does beginning in verse 2 is he talks about their preaching. So we're looking at the conduct of these leaders, these missionaries. In verse 2, he begins to talk about their preaching. Verse 2, "But even after we had suffered before," remember they suffered before they even got there, "and were spitefully treated at Philippi." That was the city that they were in before. "As you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict," which was a crazy thought. They had just gotten chased out of town and beat up and threatened and all these things in Philippi, and then they go to Thessalonica and do the same thing. But such is life when you're preaching the gospel. You know that it's life-giving, and being rejected or threatened, you don't take that personally. You say, you know what, they're rejecting the Lord. We got to keep pushing on, and so that's what they did. Even in conflict, they came to the Thessalonians. Verse 4, "For our exhortation did not come from error or uncleanness, nor was it in deceit." He's talking about their teaching, the message that they had. It wasn't erroneous. It wasn't unclean or perverted. It wasn't deceptive. It was a pure message. It was from God. Verse 4, "But as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts." We're not out to please people. We just want to please God. Verse 5, "For neither at any time did we use flattering words." Remember that word, flattery. That's a big one. Flattery is somebody telling me something about myself that I wish was true. Okay? He says we didn't use flattery there. Verse 4, "But as we have been approved by God to be entrusted," verse 5, "For neither at any time did we use flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness." God is witness. We weren't hiding anything. We weren't trying to get anything from you. "Nor did we seek glory from men, either from you or from others, when we might have made demands as apostles of Christ." And that word apostles applied to Paul and his traveling companions in its truest sense. Apostle means sent out with a message, and they had been sent out with a message. And he says we weren't making demands. We could have made demands. We're apostles, and we could have demanded money or whatever, some sort of payment. And he says we didn't do that. Now, where we got to the middle of was in the next section, which is practice, and that takes us from verses 7 to 12. So again, remember that the bigger idea here is we're looking at the conduct of the missionaries. When they came, What were they like? What did they do? How did they live? How did they act? Well, first of all, he told us about their preaching. It was a true message. It was pure. They weren't hiding anything. They're just sharing God's word. Secondly, what we look at is their practice. And there's a couple of different things. And now there's a whole bunch of, there's a lot of points in here in these verses. And I have got to be careful, and I'll share with you why, and you may not care, but I'll tell you anyways. This, verses 7 through 12, for many years, I shared with you last time that since, I believe it was 1994 when I first studied, 1994, that's the 1900s. 1994. When I first studied through this for myself, and I had been saved for about a year, and I was just young and dumb. I'm old and dumb now, but I was young and dumb then. And God really used these verses to speak to my heart in a big way, so that, and I was involved in ministry back then, but it was only here and there. I would volunteer for different things. I would volunteer to clean the church toilets or paint a wall or whatever they needed help with. I really wasn't doing too much. Not nearly, I definitely was not teaching at all at that point. But God did something. I was a young father at that time. And God used these verses to really burn a model of what a leader does and is and how he or she conducts themselves. He used these to burn a picture of that in my mind and in my heart. And I have since then, and since being involved in ministry so many years ago, I have sought to put these things, or to use these verses, specifically verses 7 through 12, as my own model. Not just with my family, but with every volunteer that I've ever worked with in the church setting, and with just other people. When I coached my kids when they were, just knee-high to a grasshopper, and I was coaching them, I was trying to implement these principles. Now again, it's a really, really big deal to me. It may not be that big of a deal to you, because you may be going, well, you know what? I'm not a missionary. I'm not a leader, so it's not really that big of a deal to me. I don't have a family. I'm not leading a ministry. I'm not coaching a soccer team. So what does this have to do with me? However, there are principles in here concerning leadership that are going to be valuable for every single one of us. Besides that, what Paul's sharing with them, the way that he was in Thessalonica, he did that so that the Thessalonians would see their example and do the same thing, because that's what we do. We watch other Christians and we go, okay, how are they living the Christian life? How are they putting this into practice? And then we go, oh, okay, I see how it's done. I need to do the same thing. That's what we do. That's what I've always done. I've watched godly men throughout my Christian life who were obedient to the Lord to the best of their ability, and they were following the Lord, and I said, okay, that's what it looks like. That's what I need to do. So as you and I read through these things, I've got to be careful that I not take too much time, because I love these verses so much. But also, if you're thinking, well, it's not really for me. I'm not a missionary. I'm not a leader. I don't do any of that stuff. There are principles here that you want to implement. Why? Because they're godly. And because your leaders, and we've got a team of leaders in here, and we are doing our best, whether they know it or not, we are doing our best to implement these things and to be these things for all of you. And so as we read through these, you may see some of your leaders. You may go, you know what, I was just at winter camp with these leaders, and I feel like these leaders were doing this. Or I was on the Mile High mission with these leaders, and I feel like the leaders were really doing this. And so you want to take note of that. Now, what I did was verses 7 and 8, we can get those up there. In their practice, here's a subpoint to our subpoint, okay? Got to be careful. I go crazy with the subpoints. The first thing in their practice may seem like, well, that's a no-brainer. They were caring. But that is not always true of a leader. Sadly, it's not always true of a Christian. Okay? As Christians in general, we should be caring. We should be the most caring people in the world. And certainly Christian leaders ought to be the most caring of all. But they're not always, as you all know, as we all know. Verse 7, he says, but. Okay, but. So remember verse 6, we could have made demands. We could have demanded things, payment from you. But, remember the word but indicates a change of direction. But, instead, that's what he's saying, we were gentle among you. That's why I said caring. Now again, we looked at this last time briefly, but here's the example that he uses of gentleness. And all of us know what it means to be gentle. He says, just as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. And some translations say just as a nurse cherishes her own children. Just so that we're clear, what it means is it's talking about a mom who has a baby, and I know this is going to seem so awkward, but it's just, this is the way it is. It's a mom who's had a baby and she's breastfeeding her baby. Okay? Now, you may not know anything about that, or you may have seen your mom if you've got younger siblings. I've got a wife, and she gave birth to 4 kids, and so I saw it for many, many years. And so I'm familiar with the picture. Now, what is amazing to me is that Paul, and you know, the sources say that he was short and bald with a hook nose and bow-legged, and you know, we just know that he just came from Philippi where he almost got killed there, and he was always getting beat up and chased out, and he just kept going and going and going. And he seems like a rough and rugged individual, not mean, but just like, no, let's go. Like we, you know, living out, you know, just wherever he needed to sleep and just on the road, on the go. And yet, when he considers ministry and leadership and how Christians should treat one another, the first picture that he uses is that of a mother who is breastfeeding her own children. And the word cherishes, and I pointed this out last time, so if you've got notes already, you may have this, but the word cherishes means to warm with body heat. And if you have seen a baby being breastfed, that's exactly what happens. That mom wraps that baby up all tight like a taco and pulls that baby in close. And sometimes skin to skin, you know, especially if they're, you know, those brand new babies still in the hospital. You know, that certainly can happen where they're skin to skin. And what's happening is that mom is cherishing or warming that baby with her own body heat. And Paul says, when we were with you, we were gentle with you in that way. We were warming you with our own body heat. Now, you know, obviously he doesn't mean that they were actually, you know, come in here close and, you know, let's, you know, it wasn't anything weird like that, but he's using that picture to describe or to remind them of what ministry was like when they were there. This also would represent for us and for the Thessalonians protection and provision. It's a place of safety. Once that baby begins to breastfeed, that baby doesn't have any worries. That baby's not worrying about, okay, well, what's the next meal? Or, you know, where are we going to go next? Or, you know, can we go to this place or that place? That baby's not thinking about anything else. That baby is in the arms of its mother, wrapped up nice and tight and warm. And there are no concerns, no cares, no worries. And Paul says, when we were there, we were gentle with you that way. That is just astounding. And that is, as I mentioned last time, as I go through this list, and I told you, I use this as my model, there's where I blow it on the first one. Ding, sorry. Thank you for playing. Ding, ding. I'm not as gentle as I could be, should be. I'm not. That's my confession before you. Some of these things I might do a little bit better on, I might not, but this is a model that I'm reaching for, and here I am, you know, 25 years later or something, or 20, I don't remember how many years it is now, but 20 years later, and I'm still reaching for these things. I have not attained yet. I need to be gentle. I need to be gentle more and more and more. Now, the next thing that he mentions is in verse 8, again, caring, so affectionately longing for you. And that phrase, affectionately longing, means yearning for them, longing for them. so affectionately longing for you. Now, doesn't that describe a mom with a brand new baby? You just cannot separate the two, can you? Even in the animal kingdom, I stopped at Home Depot yesterday because I was looking for lavender. Yes, I like lavender. And so I was looking for some lavender plants at Home Depot. And I was walking in through the garden center, the garden area, looking at flowers and different things. Love flowers. And I saw a guy pushing a basket, and he was talking to a bird that was sitting on the bar. I mean, we're in California, so it's like, whatever, I don't know. Maybe the bird's talking back to him. I don't know. He was laughing and talking to the bird. Well, I didn't know what he was doing, so I just walked past him. Well, a couple minutes later, as I'm kind of making my rounds, I'm walking down that aisle where that guy was, and something hit me in the head. It was like, what in the world was that? It was that bird that he was talking to. And that thing went up to the bar, and I'm like, what in the world? And now I'm laughing, talking to the bird. What are you doing? Like it's going to answer. That bird, as I turned around to take another step, that bird did another dive bomb and came right at me and came right at my head and hit the back of my head. And it was like, what in the world's going on? And I kept walking. I was laughing to myself. Nobody saw. And when I was ready to leave, I was looking around. I was walking back out. This time I was ready. And I saw the bird, and I'm coming down the aisle, and I had my hands up like this, and I'm walking by, and that bird, sure enough, it came down, swooping toward me, and was trying to dive bomb me again, and, peck at my head. It was like the old Hitchcock film, The Birds, It was like, ah! I was like Tippi Hedren, messing up my hair or whatever. What was going on? The bird had a nest nearby. And so the bird saw a threat and came to attack. I mean, it's animal kingdom, or especially a mom with a brand new baby, to separate the two? Come on, not going to happen. And what does Paul say? We were affectionately longing for you. We were yearning for you. We wanted to be with you so bad. We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us. Now, Paul says something here. Listen to what I say. Let me explain, please, before you freak out. Paul, there in verse 8, is saying that the presentation of the gospel of God was not enough. I told you, you're going to look at me like, oh, you're not going to believe what Pastor Chris said. The gospel's not enough. Listen to what he's saying. We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives. What he's saying is that when they presented the gospel of God, it wasn't enough to just tell them, hey, here's the gospel message, see you later. He says, we presented the gospel message, and then you saw it because we imparted not only the message, but our own lives also. That word impart, I want you to think about that as investing. We were well pleased to invest in you, not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives. Paul says we gave you the gospel, and then we gave you ourselves also. You know that the gospel is best presented in conjunction with a life that's living according to that gospel. In other words, I can say it this way, most people, most Christians become Christians through a friendship or some sort of relationship. Now, every once in a while, someone will get saved out on the street because somebody's out there presenting the gospel. But I'd be willing to bet that even if that does happen, it's probably because somebody, some Christian, has been talking to that person ahead of time, planting the seeds and watering, and then they're out on the street and somebody says, hey, you need to get saved, you need Jesus, and they go, you know what, yeah, you're right, I need to do it right now. It's probably because somebody's already been sharing the gospel with them and imparting their lives to them, living it out, giving them that example, loving them. So most people come to Christ through relationships, and Paul is saying here, man, we gave you the gospel of God, but we gave you our very own lives also. We invested in you. I'm always amazed. Now, when we go to camp, or we go to the Mile High Mission, you need to know this. I love being there. I love being there. But I've got to come clean. The truth is, the fact is that I'm getting paid to be there. The volunteer leaders are not. They're taking time off of work. They're using vacation time to hang out with you. Is that crazy? I love it, but so do they. And they're not getting paid for it. And I'm not trying to say that my love for you isn't genuine, or, I'm only there to get paid. I'm not. Or only there because I'm getting paid. I'm not. I just want you to understand that your leaders are investing time in you away from work, away from their families, even on a Wednesday night. They could be sitting with their spouses in the sanctuary, or they could be at home, cozy on the couch watching the LA Galaxy game, or they could be out to dinner, over on Newport somewhere, having, some dinner, eating Italian or something. There's a thousand other things they could be doing. And they're choosing to hang out with you. That's the picture. They're imparting to you their lives. You're getting, and generally speaking, you're getting the gospel right now, or you're getting God's word right now presented to you. And then they're here to impart their lives into you. And then he tells them why in verse 8, because you had become dear to us. They had become precious to them. Paul saw them as precious people, as dear people. The leaders, again, use them as an example. They love you. And we will talk about you even outside of Wednesday nights or Sundays or a camp or a trip or whatever. We talk about you guys. Man, isn't he so cool? Or isn't she so sweet? Or man, it's so neat to see the Lord working in them. Some of you are like, of course they do, because, I'm so sweet. But we talk about you. We love you. We're investing our own lives into you. You've become dear to us. Now, we move on to verses 9 through 12, and we're still in this section of practice. So, 1 Thess 2, we're looking at the conduct of the missionaries. How did they live? What did they do when they were in Thessalonica? We read first about their preaching. We know what their message was like. And now we're looking at their practice, verses 7 through 12. Well, verses 7 through 8, we just saw that they were caring leaders, caring individuals. Now we see that they were committed. If that wasn't clear already, it will become very clear here, beginning in verse 9. For you remember, brethren, again, brothers, family, our labor and toil. So you've got labor, which is work, and then toil, which is working to the point of exhaustion. So labor and toil. When did they do this? For laboring night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you, we preach to you the gospel of God. Now, he doesn't say it expressly in plain words, but what Paul is most likely alluding to or reminding them of, and the Thessalonians would know this, is the fact that Paul and his companions would work outside of teaching Bible studies and doing ministry and those different things. It is commonly known that Paul was a tent maker. He actually made tents, probably out of animal skins. We don't know that for sure, but he made tents. And he would sell those tents. Why did he do that? So that he could go to Thessalonica and pay for his own ministry his own way and not have to make demands of the Thessalonians. Remember he said that earlier? We didn't make demands. So they would sell things in order to fund their trips and the ministry that they were doing. Again, the Thessalonians and other churches, they were not being charged. Sometimes the churches chose to give, but they were not being charged. Like, well, we can't give it to you unless you pay us enough. We know that there are Christian leaders that are that way. Can't come unless you pay. Years ago when I was being trained by my friend Jason, many of you know him, he's really, really into music, and so he would have Christian bands coming through the church all the time. And there were times, oftentimes, where these Christian bands, and this is years ago, again, this is back in the 1900s, but the Christians, we don't really do this anymore, but lots of those bands would come through and say, well, you know what, we can only come if you pay us, this much money. And that Jason was like, man, he used to drive a hard bargain, and he was no, yeah, I can only afford this much. Well, sorry, not coming. Okay, that's fine. And then they would call back, okay, we can come, But it was so many of them were in it for the money, and it was so rare to have one of the bands say, you know what, I'll come for free. I'll come for free, and we won't charge you anything. We just want to minister to your youth. It was so very rare, so very rare. Here, Paul says we were doing what we were doing. We were laboring and toiling, laboring night and day. We didn't want to be a burden to any of you, so we didn't charge you anything. We preached to you the gospel of God free of charge. But they were committed also, verse 10, you are witnesses. He says, you remember, and God also. Now, this is getting serious. He's saying, listen, Thessalonians, it wasn't just you, but God's witness also, how three things, devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behaved ourselves among you who believe. See, this is why it's my model. I'm not there yet. I'm reaching. This is what I'm grasping for. Devoutly, he says, he's talking about their behavior. Devoutly means that they were committed religiously. That's why I called it committed, verses 9 through 12, committed. Justly, that means lawfully upright. They weren't breaking rules and laws. I mean, in a sense they were, right? Just general, we're preaching the gospel, telling you that there is no other God but this God. And, the officials sometimes would get angry about those things. But he says we were devout. We were just, and then finally, blamelessly, we behaved ourselves among you who believe. Blameless. That means accusations would not stick. It's, again, the picture of me having a dartboard over here on the wall. I take a dart, I toss that, I hit bullseye. Yeah, right. But it hits and then falls out. Paul says, you could throw accusations at us, but nothing was going to stick. Because we were the real deal. We were genuine. You may remember a few weeks ago, we were in 1 Samuel together, and Samuel gave that really cool speech. His job as the prophet or leader of Israel, religious leader at least, or leader, is coming to an end there. When we get back to it this Sunday, we'll remind you some more of that. But you might remember that Samuel, the prophet, was saying, hey, I haven't stolen anybody's donkey. I haven't cheated anybody. If I've cheated somebody, speak up now. Nobody spoke up because Samuel was blameless. That's the idea. Is you could accuse him of something, but it's not going to stick. And he's saying that's how we behaved ourselves among you. Now in verse 11, as you know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you. Now listen to what he does in verse 11. As a father does his own children. Now he started with the picture of a mom. A nursing mom. Now he finishes up in verse 11. He's not done yet. We'll go to verse 12. But in verse 11, he says, we treated you not just like a mom, a caring mom, but a committed father. Now this may be a hard one for some of us. My dad, I had a good dad growing up. And I say good, that's in a worldly sense. He had a lot of issues, a lot of problems. My glasses are coming off, so it's about to be this is a session. Okay. He had issues, he had problems. It was when I was a little kid, it wasn't really a big deal to me. He was always around, but there was, as I got older, I realized, oh, yeah, he has some issues. And the family had issues, but, he, generally speaking, he'd coach my baseball teams or, when I played soccer a couple times, he was out there to help coach, and he was around and, did all those different things, but there were other things that he was also doing. And so for some of you, and some of you may have a bad relationship with your dad. In fact, some of you know this, but I have not spoken. As far as I know, my dad's still alive. I just have not spoken with him for probably... it's probably been 20 years. I had to ask him to excuse himself from my family because of his behavior. And so I haven't seen him in that long. Now, I was already obviously a young husband, young father at that point, but still, I was like just starting to be a Christian, and I needed somebody there to say, no, don't do that, do this, or do this and don't do that. And so it was a huge deal when he was asked to leave and when he left the family. And so for some of us, we might go, oh, a father, yeah, whatever. Listen, all of you guys in here, these are times when you want to take notes and go, you know what? Maybe you don't know what a good father looks like. I don't know. I don't know everybody's dads in here. Some of you got great dads. But if you're not really sure and you go, you know what? I don't really know what a dad is supposed to be like. Verse 11, exhorted, comforted, charged as a father does his own children. Those are three things that a dad should be doing. And ladies, if you are going to marry somebody, which probably the majority of you are, it's okay if he's cute and if he smells good, has got the right cologne or right clothes. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But you want to be looking for somebody that is going to be the father of your children. Not just your husband, the father of your children. Should God bless you with children. What kind of father do you want? Well, he looks really cute when he's in the club dancing. Okay. But can he raise your kids? Is he going to lead your kids in the way that they should go, so that when they're older, they will not depart? These are three things that dads do, or at least, here I am, guilty again, three things that we should be doing. The word exhorted means calling to one's side for the purpose of training. So it's a dad who says, hey, come over here. Let me show you how to do this. For me, that has... I've done that in different ways over the years with my kids. My girls all know how to change their own oil. They don't always choose to do it themselves. Sometimes they go, I'll let Walmart do it. I don't want to mess up my nails. That's up to you, but I've shown you how to do it. You can save some money, but you don't want to save money, that's fine. They know how to change their brakes. I'll show you how to change brakes. You don't want to do it, that's fine, but I'm showing you how to save some money. And there are different things that I have shown them, practical things that way, but it's calling to one side and saying, hey, here's how you do it. And in this case, and this would be the obviously the main goal of a father, is let me show you how to be a Christian. Come over here next to me and let me train you and show you what I'm doing. And I've attempted to do that also, to the best of my ability, I guess I would say. I haven't always done that well. In fact, I've made so many mistakes. I did not realize just how imperfect I was until I started having kids. Oh, man, have I made so many mistakes. I've become an expert at saying, will you please forgive me? I shouldn't have said it that way. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have, did it this way. Exhorted means to call to one side for the purpose of training. That's one of the things that a good dad does. Here's another thing that a good dad does. Comforts. Just comforts. Some of you, hopefully, you've got a dad that does that. And if you do, and he just, wraps you up in his arms and says, hey, come on, it's going to be all right. You've got a good thing, and you want to be thankful for that. I told you a little bit about my dad. I haven't given a bunch of details. But years ago, I was 20 years old, and I was on my way home. It was a weeknight, and I was on my way home to tell my dad that my girlfriend was pregnant. I was not married, obviously. And my dad had already previously told me, you ever do that, I'm kicking you out. He was a Christian, as far as I know. That's for a different story for a different time. But I still remember walking into we had a little old house there in San Bernardino, and opened the front door, and my dad and my two sisters were standing in our little yellow kitchen that hadn't been repainted since 1970 something. I don't know what it was. And I said, hey, I got to tell you something. And as soon as I started to open my mouth, I started to bawl like a little baby. I know, I look really tough to you, but I actually do have a heart. And I started to bawl like a little baby, and they're looking at me like, my younger sisters are looking at me like, well, what did you sniff now? It's like, no, I'm not high on nothing. And I said, man, and I told him my girlfriend's pregnant. And my dad, I fully expected him to say, grab your stuff, get out. He walked over to me. My dad hugged me. From what I can remember, my dad hugged me twice in my life. You might be thinking right now, that explains so much. He hugged me twice in my life. This time, and then another time that we were in church together. But I knew that he loved me. I knew that he loved me. I wasn't tripping about any of that. But I remember that night he just walked over and he grabbed me and hugged me and told me, it's going to be okay. That made all the difference. That was the Bible says was a valley of decision. That was a valley of decision. And I decided right there, I saw Christianity in clothing right there. I saw Christianity being lived out. I saw a dad loving and caring for his son, not judging, having mercy. And I committed my heart to Christ when I was 20 years old. Partly because of that. I already knew the gospel. I had already heard it. I knew how I was supposed to be living, and I knew that the way I was living wasn't right. But that solidified it. I gave my life to Christ partly because I had that picture of this loving Father who was a picture of a loving Heavenly Father. Man, if my dad can forgive me and have mercy on me, God, who loves me, certainly is ready to receive me. And so I repented, surrendered my life to Christ, put my hand to the plow and never looked back. Here's the third thing that a dad does. He charges. That means he says, we charge to every one of you as a father does his own children. It means to entrust with. In 1 Corinthians 4:14, Paul said, I do not write these things to shame you, but as my beloved children, I warn you. He's writing to them in Corinthians. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm just trying to warn you. You got to be doing these things. And that's what it means here. He entrusted them. He's giving them the gospel and saying, this is what you got to believe. This is what you got to do. This is how you got to live. We're imparting our own lives. He was entrusting them, warning them. Now, he was committed, I said, right? Verses 9 through 12. Look at verse 12. A committed person is going to go all the way to the end. Verse 12. That you, why were they doing all this? That you would walk worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. Right there in verse 12, he gives the goal. Why were they doing all of this? You know, before Paul and his companions came into Thessalonica, nobody knew each other. So what's the motivation here? Well, it was to preach the gospel and see people saved. But then why did Paul stay? Well, he tells us in verse 12 why he was doing all of this. That's the key word there, that. I'm telling you, this is why. That you would walk worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. We're doing this so that you would have a worthy walk, a walk worthy of God. Now, what does walk mean? It means a life or a lifestyle. That's a term that Paul often used. Walk wasn't talking about literally practically walking. He's talking about living, the way that you live. He says that you would live a life worthy of God, who, by the way, calls you into his own kingdom and glory. Why are the leaders showing up on a Wednesday night, a Sunday morning? Why are they spending a week with you at Mile High? Why are they spending a weekend with you at camp? Why are they doing these events? Why are they hanging? What's the deal? What is that for? Do they ever ask you for money? No, I guess that's not it. Maybe the church pays them. No, the church doesn't pay them. They might get a little discount on some of the trips or something, but no, the church, they're not getting paid. Why are they doing it? This is why, verse 12. That you, high school students, would have a life worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. Walk is life or lifestyle. One Bible teacher or Bible commentator said this. Let me read this for you. It's a little bit long, but let me work my way through it here. He asked, what is our great gospel privilege? That God has called us to his kingdom and glory. The gospel calls us into the kingdom and state of grace here on earth, and unto the kingdom and state of glory hereafter, or heaven, to heaven and happiness as our end, and to holiness as the way to that end. So we're headed for happiness in heaven, and right now we're striving for holiness. He also says this, he asks another question, what is our great gospel duty? That we would walk worthy of God. That the temper of our minds and tenor of our lives, that means the main point of our lives, be answerable to his call and suitable to his privilege. We should accommodate ourselves to the intention and design of the gospel and live suitably to our profession and privileges, our hopes and expectations as becomes those who are called with such a high and holy calling. What? Let's just show you plainly. What he's saying is, in all of this, and what verse 12 is saying is, Paul was explaining that we've preached the gospel to you, now we're showing you how to do it. Why? Because we want your lives to change for the better. We want you to have a walk that's worthy of God or fitting of God. You've given your life to God, your lifestyle should reflect that. Remember, what we believe determines how we behave. So belief, then behavior. Okay, well, all right. So if we're Christians, our lives should be displaying that. Not automatically just like, okay, I'm fully mature, I'm a fully mature Christian immediately. No, there's growth that's taking place, but there's progress. There's a process and there's progress. And I'm following the Lord and I'm changing. My life is changing little by little, but it's changing. And that's, Paul is saying, that's what we're doing all of this for. So what do we as Christians look like? I don't think this is working yet, but let me show you something. Okay, go ahead and click one time for me. Hey, Queen. You tell me. You help me out. Where are these young ladies at? Where are they at? What's that? Stagecoach. What is Stagecoach? I know you all know because your parents have been there. What is Stagecoach? Anybody? Nobody knows. What kind of music festival? Thank you, Kaya. Country music festival. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Help me out. Family. Joseph and Mary had a son. His name was? Okay. So what I'm trying to say is obvious. Okay? Coachella, or not, it's at Coachella, but it's Stagecoach Country Music Festival. Does that make sense to you? Yes or no? Okay. Let's get one more picture up there. What about this young lady? Where's she at? Is she at a country music festival? She might be, but she's probably not at the same place as these young ladies. Yes or no? Yeah. She's probably somewhere else. Where do you think she's at? Burning Man. Okay, she might be at Burning Man. Yeah, she might be at Burning Man. In other words, EDM, right? Electronic, dance, music. Right? So she's obviously listening to a different style of music. How do we know that? How do we know that? Oh, family, you got to help me out. Okay, these young ladies, how do we know that they're at a country music festival? Because their outfits are so cutesy, right? How do we know that she's at an EDM festival? Her outfit. Let's get another one up there for you. You're warmed up. They're not at a music festival, but they might be on their way. What kind of music did they listen to? Somebody said emo. Emo. What would the style be called? Thank you very much. Right? Goth. Let's get one more. What about this cat? What kind of music does he listen to? Yeah. Said Justin Bieber. Baby, baby, baby. Oh. How do we know that? How do we know what they're listening to? We know that because of how they look, their style. We know that. For the Christian, how do we know that they're a Christian? We know that by the way that they live. Sometimes by the way they look. It might be a t-shirt that says Jesus or something on it. Might be some jewelry. It might just be the fact that the young lady from the EDM festival, I'll tell you what, it was hard to find a picture where the girls had clothes on. It's like, man, I know over in San Bernardino, the Orange Show is there, and there are raves often, and so sometimes I'm driving by and I see, and it's like, good night, nurse. It's not good to walk around San Bernardino dressed like that, but we know these things. We can tell something about these people by the way that they look, right? What about for you and me as Christians? It's not always by the way we look. Everybody's got different style, different fashion, different whatever, listen to different music. So we're not talking about music, but we are talking about a life or a walk that is worthy of God. The point being that what Paul is saying is that we want to help you to live a life that is identified with God, and people will know it. How will they know it? Because I will be what? I will be gentle. I will cherish. I will have an affectionate longing for. I will impart into others my very own life. I'll be willing to labor and toil. I will be devout and just and blameless. I will exhort and comfort and charge. I'll be doing all of these things, and people will notice. They'll see that and they'll go, you might look like everybody else. There's not a big difference on the outside maybe, but they'll go, but I can tell something different. You're different. You're different. Years ago, I was used to work for a recycling company, and when you worked at this particular recycling company, we had individual sites at supermarkets, and so I'd normally be there working by myself. But in San Bernardino years ago, on the 1st and 15th, I'm not trying to be funny here, it's just facts. On the 1st and 15th, welfare checks came out. So that meant that on the 31st and the 14th, the days before payment day, you would show up to the recycling place and you would have a line. People are there like, man, I'm trying to make it through the last day and I'm here to recycle everything that I've got. And so they would occasionally send people out to help the person that was stationed there. And so I had started that morning, showed up, and I got started a couple minutes early because I had a long line, and I'm doing my best to knock it out. And this young man, another employee from the same company, I had never met him before, he showed up, and he got his gloves on and just jumped in line. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he just starts helping. And after several minutes, we saw that line disappear and got a little bit of down, and we both sat on the edge of the little metal containers that we were sitting in. I sat down. The first thing he says to me is, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" Now, all I did was grab barrels, weigh them, dump them, give a ticket for their payment. That's all I was doing. I wasn't saying, "God bless you, Jesus." I wasn't doing it. I was like, let's get rid of this line. I kind of laughed. I said, "Yes." "How'd you know?" He says, "You're not cussing." That was it. That was it. Now, before I got saved, man, you've heard the term cuss like a sailor. I used to cuss. I had a filthy mouth. Filthy mouth. But now I'm saved, and that was it. That's all it took. He says, you're not cussing. That was all. Because evidently everybody else that he had worked with, it was just normal for them. It was normal language. I remember when I was cussing, it was just normal. It was just roll right off the tongue. First thing out of my mouth. But now, Christ is changing me, and I'm not speaking like that anymore. And that was all it took. That's the point that Paul is making in verse 12. He says, we're doing all of this to help you to have a walk that is identifiable with God. We hear the word worthy, we go, oh, worthy. I'm not worthy. He's not talking about perfection and you got to be, don't do anything wrong or, any of those things. What he's saying is you would have a walk that matches your relationship with God. That's what we're doing. That's what your leaders are doing. That's what I'm doing here. That's what your leaders are doing. That's what Paul was doing. That's what you want to be doing with other Christians around you. You want to be helping one another to have a walk worthy of God. Why do you do what you do? The way that you live. You want to have a walk worthy of God. So, Father, we are so very thankful for your word, and